After beveling your plate, you're going to want to apply a resist to the surface of the plate. To do that, you're going to step into the acid room, and in this case, we're going to use hard ground as our resist. Please follow all posted signage in regard to safety protocols and personal protective equipment. Upon entering the acid room, turn on both the light and ventilation switches immediately to your right. In the acid room, there are several other features I would like to make you aware of, including solvent storage, the hot plate, and the solvent cleaning bin. On your right is the ferric chloride bath and sink. And to your left is the area for applying hard ground. Hard ground is made from asphaltum, solvent, grease, and wax. Another important factor with hard ground is to know that it needs to cure or dry. We do that with a hot plate. So you want to check the hot plate and make sure that it's turned to 250 degrees. The on switch should be up and the red light will be on. At the hot plate, you'll notice two trowels for moving hot plates. When the hot plate is on, make sure to switch the sign around so that it says hot. Once the hot plate is on, I'll need gloves, newsprint, brushes, and hard ground. There are several usable brushes in the brush cleaner container. Here you can see I've got a brush, a plate, and gloves. Here's a look inside the brush cleaner container and the asphaltum container. Before you use a brush to apply the hard ground, you want to strip the extra mineral spirits out of it using paper towels. Get the brush tip nice and clean. It will still be discolored from the asphaltum in the hard ground, but you want to get all the solvent out of it if possible. Soak the bristles in the hard ground for a good 30 to 45 seconds. And then clean the brush off on the edge of the container. Paint a thick stripe of hard ground across one edge of the plate. Using that thick stripe of hard ground, pull across it with the brush, going completely off the edges of the plate. You can see that I'm getting hard ground on the newsprint, and that's what it's there for. Once I'm done applying the hard ground, I can use the newsprint to transfer the plate to the hot plate. Right now I'm leaning the plate up to let little air bubbles run off the edge. Sometimes the air bubbles will pop on the hot plate. After they pop, little holes will be left in the ground for the ferric chloride to etch tiny dots in your image. So I'm using gravity to pull the air bubbles off the plate. The hot plate will expedite the drying time or curing time of the hard ground to about 3 to 5 minutes. Here I'll apply hard ground to a second larger plate using the same technique. Thicker application of hard ground along the top edge, dragging that hard ground across the rest of the plate, adding hard ground to the brush if I need to. When I'm done, the hard ground should look almost like burnt toast. It shouldn't be a solid black. I should be able to see a little bit of the color of the copper through the hard ground. If it's too thick, it will crack when I'm drawing, or I will have to use a lot more pressure to break through the hard ground. A nice thin, somewhat even coat is preferred. At this angle you can see the color of the copper. Both plates will only need about 3 to 5 minutes of time on the hot plate to cure the hard ground. Any longer and the hard ground might get a little brittle. Too short, it will still be soft. While both hot plates are curing, I'm going to make sure I clean up all my solvent waste and put it in the solvent waste bin. Make sure that all materials are completely inside the solvent waste bin. After 3 to 5 minutes on the hot plate, I want to rinse both copper plates with the hard ground off in cold water. The cold water will cause the hard ground to set up and become rigid almost instantly, while also cooling the plate enough that I can touch it and handle it without the newsprint. The copper plate and hard ground can now be blotted dry with paper towel to get rid of any of the water. That way I'm ready to transfer or draw on the plate as soon as it's dry. Make sure to dispose of any wet waste in the wet waste bin next to the sink. And now I'll repeat the procedure with the second larger copper plate. This procedure is slightly sped up on the second plate with time lapse. Make sure to blot the plate, just like the first one. Once you're finished with the hot plate, please make sure to turn off the switch. Once your plate is cool and dry, hit the bevels with a Sharpie. A fat Sharpie works best. This will reinforce the hard ground on the bevels to prevent false biting along your bevels and along the edges of your image. Be very thorough and make sure you're getting the complete bevel. You can also do this with hard ground and a small brush, but I find that the Sharpie dries faster, is less toxic, and can be used to cover up any of those pinholes I mentioned earlier when air bubbles pop in the hard ground on the hot plate and leave a little hole in the ground. And make sure you get the complete bevel all the way from the top of the edge of the plate to the bottom. Here you can see where I missed a small piece of the corner, so I recommend tilting the plate up off the counter and the newsprint and just hitting the very edge. Thank you and good luck.